because this is going to be one fun night. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our Vice President of the Board of Trustees for the Westport Library, Sivan Hong.
Hello, ladies, and maybe a few gentlemen. Like 3 or 4 of you out there. Welcome to our spectacular new Westport Library. And thank you to Mio Net. I love wine, right, Doug? If you haven't had any of his wine yet tonight, make sure you go over there and say hello to him after our talk tonight. As Jennifer said, I am Sivan Hong. I am a trustee of the Board of Directors of our Westport Library, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce this sold-out room to 2 incredible women. Our interviewer, Jennifer Blankfein, is a fellow Westporter, freelance marketing consultant, and avid reader, as demonstrated by her blog, Book Nation by Jen. If you haven't checked it out, you should definitely check it out tonight. Our other guest this evening needs little introduction. Candace Bushnell is a woman who narrated many of our younger lives, remarking on moments of laughter and tears in a way that made us feel like we were all part of something bigger. It was her voice that reminded us of the power of female friendship and helped us create our own vision of female empowerment. Her new book, Is There Still Sex in the City?, strengthens this theme. In it, she reminds us that even as we age, life can throw us a lot of curveballs. The power of female friendship persists and arguably gets even stronger. Please join me by giving a warm round of applause to Jennifer and Candace Bushnell.
Thank you, Candace, for being here. And thank you to everybody else who's here to celebrate the release of your new book. We're thrilled to have a first look the night before the real release of Is There Still Sex in the City, available to the public. 20 years ago, you reshaped the landscape of pop culture with your frank and humorous take on sex and dating. You worked as a journalist at the New York Observer, which led to your first book, Sex and the City. We all know and love it, and of course, it became a hit TV show and spawned 2 movies as well. You've written 9 books in total, or maybe more, but you've published 9 books in total, including a prequel to Sex and the City called The Carrie Diaries, and Lipstick Jungle about women friends and their lives as successful businesswomen, both of which were popular TV shows. Is There Sex in the City is not a sequel. It follows a whole new group of female friends navigating life and dating in midlife. And I know you'd like to read a little bit from the book now.
Yes, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. What really inspired this book was a passage of life that I went through in my mid-50s, or in my 50s. Like, a lot of stuff happened to me at the beginning of my 50s. And I got divorced, and my mother died, my dog dropped dead, and a lot of things just really threw me for a loop. So that I found myself again in my mid-50s, single, and thinking, nobody ever told me that I was gonna get to be in my 50s and I was gonna have to start all over again, including dating. So I found out a lot of things about dating in midlife, most of it funny. The good news is that it can happen. I did find a guy, my new boyfriend, who's a really great guy. But before that, as you know, you've got to go out with a couple of non-candidates. And this is one of the things that happened to me. I call this the "he's as old as your father" guy. The reality of midlife dating can cause some women to try to game the odds in their favor by playing the game. In other words, dating a man, and this is based on the idea that you know how men always want to date younger. Well, so women are going to play the game by dating a man who is 15, 20, even 25 years older. Which means, given the fact that you are now middle-aged yourself, a man who is 70, 75, or 80, you wouldn't think there would be a large contingent of men around that age who are dating. But when you think about demographics and how so many of the boomers are now in their later years, it makes sense that there's a crop of 60, 70, and even 80-something men out there acting like they're 35. I encountered one of these men at a party given by a married couple in their early 60s. There were lots of 50-something single women there, like myself, and 2 or 3 of these senior age players, or saps. These are older single men of means, meaning they have enough money to add it to their list of attributes and are often still employed in a lesser version of the high-powered career they once had. At some point during the party, I must have talked to one of these men because a few days later, Ron, the host of the party, contacted me to let me know that a fellow named Arnold was interested in taking me out. Ron was very excited about this and impressed. He said Arnold was a big deal and he really admired the guy. He played Ivy League football, and he was once an oil man and a newspaper magnate, and all the Park Avenue hostesses were always inviting him to their parties. He was sought after. I thought I remembered the guy, a tall, thick battle axe type who was definitely older. Too old for me, I decided. How old is he, I asked. Oh, he's a little bit older than I am, Ron said. 68. These guys often lie about their ages. They fudge, somehow forgetting about that truth-telling device called the internet. Sure enough, when I Googled him, Arnold turned out to be 75. That made him much closer to my father's age than mine. My father was 83. Arnold was just 8 years younger. They couldn't have been more different, though. My father is very conservative. Arnold apparently is not. According to Ron, Arnold used to be somewhat of a notorious wild man who went to Studio 54. Even to this day, Arnold still has much younger girlfriends, the last one being 45. I don't know how he does it, Ron said. I wanted to tell Ron that I didn't want to be the one to find out. And so I tried to say no to this date. Peer pressure, however, is one of the things I hadn't counted on in middle age. And when it came to dating, there was a lot of it. My friends kept reminding me that it was good to go out, and it was really good that someone had actually asked me out. When was the last time that had happened? Of course I should go. What was the harm in it? And besides, you never know. Of course, the problem with you never know is that so often you actually do know. I knew, or I was convinced I knew, that I was not going to date a 75-year-old man no matter how wonderful he was. What if he fell down? I didn't spend my life working as hard to end up taking care of a strange older person. But every time I tried to explain this, I realized how ageist and judgy and anti-love hopeful I sounded. Because I didn't know, did I? I didn't know what was going to happen. What if I fell in love with him? In which case his age wouldn't matter, right? Plus, I didn't want to be that woman. You know, that shallow creature who cares more about practicality than the blind illusions of love. Plus, as Ron reminded me, I must feel so honored that a man as powerful as Arnold wanted to spend time with little old me. In preparation for the date, I went to my friend Sassy's house and we looked at photographs of Arnold on the internet. His photos went back about 30 years. He'd been a big man and rather handsome. Oh, honey, Sassy, He said, he could turn out to be absolutely wonderful. You must keep an open mind. And so arrangements for a date were arranged. We could have gone to a restaurant in my town, but Arnold really wanted me to see his house, which was in another town about 15 minutes away. He could pick me up and take me to his town, and then I could always spend the night at his house if I needed to. And he could drive me back to my house in the morning. A sleepover? With a 75-year-old man I didn't know? I don't think so. Thank you.
I bet you can't wait to hear what happens.
Oh, well, he just keeps asking for sex the whole time. Which I have to say is something that a couple of friends warned me about. You know, I had one friend who she was actually my horse trainer. And which sounds horrible, except if you live in Westport, because you know horses are nearby. But she said that you know, all of these older men were asking her out, and she said that every single one of them tried to have sex with her on the first date and expected her to have sex on the first date. And if she said no, but then she kept talking to them or texting them, then they said that she was confusing them. So I knew it was gonna be dicey.
So in your book, you talk about women friendships and those relationships, and they seem to be the most important relationships. They have the longest, they have longevity.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And one of the inspirations for, I think I already said, I was in this situation, and a lot of my other, sorry, I don't ever get texts. So a lot of my girlfriends and I found we were in the same situations, and we really did have to look after each other. And you know, I think that everybody has that idea in their head of, oh, you know, when we get to be really old, we'll all live in a house together and we'll take care of each other. And yeah, and you know, and that really, I think for a lot of women, like that's our, you know, plan A. Exactly. It probably is plan A. Because let's face it, the truth is plan B is, you know, I mean, men usually, unfortunately, do die before women. Sorry, that's so depressing. But these friendships, like, you know, the time when I was writing Sex and the City, you know, before everybody kind of paired off and found someone, these friendships are really, really important for getting through the world again and refinding your feet. And, you know, I've seen people go through some really tough times in their 50s where, you know, they have to find another job, maybe there's a divorce, there's not really any money there, and you know, so you can really need your girlfriends in a real way.
So your book does talk about a lot of these negative things that do happen in life, and the women in this story are faced with lots of decisions and choices that they have to make. But your writing style has so much humor, and it's really such a funny story, even though it does all of the ups and downs of life. It covers everything. How do you do research for your book? How do you get your ideas? And when you go out in the world, are you always observing and taking notes? How does the book come about?
Well, it really comes about, you know, it's from my own experiences and also the experiences of others. So, I mean, what happened with this book was I really was by myself for about maybe 3 years, and I have a house up in Roxbury, which I'm trying to sell. You can Google it. You know, it's Connecticut. I've dropped the price about 10 times. And I really, it was after I got divorced, and I really wanted a break. So I spent a lot of time by myself, and that's a time when I really was just writing about things in my imagination. And then Tina Brown asked me if I wanted to do, Tina Brown had asked me if I wanted to write about dating, and at that time I'd said no. And then a woman from Cosmopolitan, an editor, and she was 25, she sent me an email basically saying, help, all of my friends are addicted to Tinder, which is a terrible dating app. Can you go on it and find out what's going on? And I was like, no. And then she was like, please, you have to help us. So I thought, okay, I'll try this. And it was very interesting. And I thought, is there really anything so new with like mating and dating and how people meet up and have relationships? And indeed, I found that there really was, and that there have been a lot of changes because of technology. And that was one of the things that, got me interested. And then I literally, you guys probably have friends who are in this situation, where, hey, 2 years ago, your friend's husband was saying to you at a party, like, oh, I love my wife so much, and then they're getting divorced. It's like, I don't get it, but, so they all had stories. And I start to hear, everybody feels like their story is unique, but there are really patterns to all of these stories and to what happens to people. So then I start to hear, a variation on the same story again and again. And so then I know, like, that's a trend, or that's something worth pursuing. For instance, the Cubs. And these are guys in their 20s, could be early 30s, it could even be like 19. And they are they pursue women who are older, 20, even 30 years older. I know someone's laughing because they're like, this happened to their friend. I know. And I noticed it happened to like girlfriends who, it happened to women you just wouldn't expect it to happen to them. So I just thought that was really something that had to be written about.
Now, what about middle-aged madness? You talk a little bit about women over 50, and they are in this phase of middle-aged madness. How do we know that we're in it?
Well, you know it because what it really is, it's a series of, it's like you kind of get knocked in life by one thing after another. And, menopause is definitely part of it. But for me, and it really comes down to, if you stay married, and, at one time, people in your 50s, you probably would have, you're going to stay married, you weren't going to get divorced, you weren't going to restart your life. And, you really could like slow down. Your children have, left home, they're off on their own. So when you go through menopause, basically in your 50s, and there would be other things that were happening too, with parents getting ill and, their sickness, but you don't also have to do a whole bunch of other things as well, like move, start a new business, date online, make career changes, confront a financial reality. So it's basically what happens to us in the norm as, human beings. But on top of it, because we live in a different time, people who, nature didn't mean for us to necessarily start over at 50 and to start dating again. But yet, because of the time we live in, we good chance have another 30 years, and that time after menopause could be when you really find the love of your life. It could be when you really hit those career goals that you really have been trying to reach. So it's
like a whole second chance.
It's like a whole second chance, but you've got to go through something. And it's also, it's a psychological and psychic change, because we're going from having a reproductive brain to, with the loss of hormones, having a non-reproductive brain, and maybe that's nature's way of giving women, a sort of freedom to maybe not care so much. I mean, that's sort of the hallmark of a lot of women when they get to be 60, is they really feel like, you know what? I just, the things that bothered me before, I see they're just not such a big deal. And you can be more courageous, I think, as well.
So do men go through this too?
Men definitely do, but men can always get out of it by restarting their reproductive life, usually with someone younger. I mean, think of how many men you know who are in their 50s or 60s and they're starting a family again with someone who's younger. So, and it tends to happen to, if they don't have money and they lose their careers, they also go through a real time of reckoning. But otherwise, if they keep going, they will. If they can sort of skate along, they will.
Now, through your characters, you convey the pressure that women feel to stay young, from surgeries to expensive creams. Is there more pressure for women to stay youthful than for men?
Well, no. I don't think there's more pressure for women. I mean, we feel like there's more pressure, but I gotta tell you something. You know that old adage of like, oh, when men age, they still look really good and women don't? Well, that's not true. Well, I mean, I have to tell you, today's women, they look generally a heck of a lot better than a lot of the guys. But I think, number one, I think there's pressure on everybody to look better these days. And I think, honestly, the most pressure is on young people. I mean, we all kind of grew up in a time when, I mean, let's face it, in the 70s, we didn't have to shave our legs. I mean, we were like, and then in the 80s, okay, you shaved your legs, but you didn't have to shave other parts. You know what I'm saying? So, this is a generation of women who they're a little bit freer from all of those beauty treatments because they weren't so widely available. I mean, when I was like, when I was like in the 80s, we never got our hair blown dry because we didn't even know about it. So, but all of that has changed. And I do think, I think that people should do what they feel comfortable doing. For me personally, I feel like, okay, I can clean up well, but the rest of the time, I honestly don't care. So I'm very happy to, go out without makeup and that sort of thing.
So in your book, you do say, society colludes to tell men they're a little bit better than they actually are, while it tells women they're a little bit worse.
Yes, I think that is something that is kind of generally true. Men are always Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is absolutely true.
Yeah,
And women have I think a lot of shame that comes from the culture. And I suppose an example of it is the age thing, where we have that saying of, you know, men get better with age, and women don't, you know, and they get worse or whatever, and women over a certain age are invisible. So those are messages that society is telling us, that it's saying like, hey guys, you're great, and hey women, you're not so great. And for me, one of the tricky things about this time was fighting against internalized ageism that I'd absorbed, which ended up coming out in a negativity towards myself. And I found that was hard to battle, because we hear so many negative messages about getting older, and, you know, restrictions, and, you know, you shouldn't want this, you shouldn't want that, you can't do this, you should be over that, or you're just done, or you should have had it figured out, you shouldn't have made any mistakes, because if you made a mistake, guess what, it's your fault. So society tends to, you know, if something goes wrong, we tend to blame, oh, it's the woman's fault.
Do you think we're making strides to improve that, like with the Me Too movement and the power of women kind of standing together?
Yes, I do, absolutely. And if I think about, you know, things have changed so much in the since I was writing Sex and the City. Now, when I was writing Sex and the City in the 90s, the mid-90s, it was like a Me Too smorgasbord. I mean, there was every kind of, you know, sexual harassment and, you know, power plays and all that kind of stuff that went on really regularly. And it was part of the landscape, and you really had to negotiate it. You had to get around all of these landmines, because there were a lot of men who made it pretty clear that, you know, sexual favors would be appreciated. It's like, I don't think so. I guess I just won't even, you know, interview for this job. I mean, that's kind of, it was like that a lot.
So I had heard that you had been asked to investigate Jeffrey Epstein in the 90s.
Yes, well, this was when I first started working for the New York Observer, before I started writing Sex and the City. And I was doing profiles. And the editor-in-chief was a woman, and she decided that I was like the Observer's secret weapon, because I could get guys to talk and like tell me things. Okay. You know, yeah, the men in New York who are really successful, first of all, they all know each other. They all do business together, even if their businesses don't seem to be related on the outside. Everybody is connected. They don't fool around. If you mess with them, they make it pretty clear, like, you know, you could just end up in the East River. And yeah, I mean, you know, New York is tough. I mean, these business guys are really, really tough. And that kind of, I mean, as I said, you know, if you interviewed a very powerful man, it's, you know, either they would try to bribe you and say, hey, I can get you a really good job after this, you know, if you write something good about me, or they threaten you. And it really wasn't unusual for my editor to get calls like, oh my God, she asked too many questions. I mean, that was pretty much standard practice in terms of journalism. I mean, everything's like a bit of a deal in order to get access you know, the person you're profiling knows the person who owns the newspaper. So anyway, there was a kind of a rogues gallery of, maybe there were like 20 different men who, you know, one who heard rumors about maybe not everything was kosher, maybe they went after women, or they did this, or they were, you know, played around, or anything that you could think of. And so Jeffrey Epstein's name was a name that came up because even back then, nobody knew what he did. Nobody really knew how he had money. They only knew that he was really, really good friends with Les Wexner, who owned The Limited. And he was rather well known in society circles. So you know, Jeffrey Epstein's name was out there, but the rumor was that it was models, and then he had a private plane. So that was the rumor, that he did something, he got models on his plane, and, you know, he got models' passports, something like that, and it sounded obviously kind of suspicious. So someone who knew him got me invited to a cocktail party at his house, and I went, and it was very bland, and the people were, you know, well-heeled, normal kinds of people, and I think that he might have been at the party literally for a minute. And so I thought, I got nothing. I didn't even get to talk to this guy. I gotta get something. So I went into the kitchen, and there was staff, of course. So I started just, hey, you know, casually trying to chat him up. Oh, God, what about that plane? And, oh, you know, where's that plane? Did you keep it at Teterboro? Because, you know, a friend of mine keeps their plane there. And I was getting information, and like, the plane was at Teterboro, this and that. And I think I'm making some progress. And then the door flies open, and like a butler bodyguard guy came in. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, nothing. He's like, why are you asking questions about Mr. Epstein's plane? And I was like, I don't know. And then he said, you see, I make a really bad spy. And so he said, I think maybe you better leave. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going. And so I left, and then the next day I got a call from a friend who was like, oh my God, you were asking questions. Now they think you're doing a story, and then I got a call from someone on his team who basically said, don't ask questions, don't investigate him, there's nothing to investigate, don't go up to him at parties, and don't talk to him. I mean, that was something that a couple of people said, like, okay, if you see this person at parties, don't go, you keep 20 feet away from them, okay? So it's like, all right, that's sort of hard if we're in an elevator. But it was a tough group. Wow. So anyway, and then when they finally got him in 2007, I was like, it took a while, but they got him. And you had an inkling. Yes, but you know what, I can't, if you want to do that kind of reporting, I mean, you really have to, you know, I mean, you have to have a lot of contacts, it's like, you have to have access, and I just don't have any of that.
Your reporting seems more fun.
Well, that's one of the reasons why it's good to, you know, it's much safer to do the fun.
Right. So earlier this year, the Wall Street Journal came out with an article about the new rules of middle age, and you were quoted as saying, we are not going to do our 50s the way everyone's telling us we're supposed to. So, do you remember that article?
Oh yes, of course I do.
It's all over Facebook. Thousands of people have made comments on it.
Oh, I haven't seen it. They probably made all kinds of comments.
Thousands of people, and all the comments are of their personal stories about how they've reinvented themselves, the and new things that they're trying.
Wow.
It's incredible. You should go on Facebook, check it out. It's
Oh.
incredible.
You know what? I don't go on Facebook because I'm scared about the Russians. No, I mean, actually, I wrote this story about face cream in this book, and anyway, this woman gave me a treatment, and she was Russian, and they got money out of me, like the way the Russians got money out of people on Facebook. It's like, they're not just on Facebook, okay? They're on Madison Avenue. But yes, I mean, I think, you know, when you look at this cohort of women from, you know, baby boomers really to Gen X, this is a cohort of women who they are used to being out in the world and doing things and breaking boundaries, really. So, I mean, it's a group of women who, you know, tried to and did do it all and have it all, and they are, you know, they're not going to stop. So they're going to continue to do things, and so I think it's exciting.
Do you think that the women over 50 are still looking for the same things that they were looking for when they were in their 20s and 30s? Or are they looking for something different? Are they settling for companionship rather than relationship?
Oh, I know. I did say something about, like, the biggest insult is companionship instead of having a full relationship. But you know what? I got used to it. I mean,
And you have your women friendships.
and you have your women friendships, but one of the things I realized, because I am dating somebody, and you know, at first we tried to do things in a traditional way, spending every night together. Well, it just doesn't work. And I know if you've got kids, it really doesn't work. But, you know, in midlife, chance that you have a life. You know, in your 30s, people are trying to get a life. In midlife, you usually have a life. You have what some people might call baggage, but I don't call it baggage, I call it a life. And there isn't that pressure like, oh, we've got to hit these marks and we've got to hit these milestones and, you know, move in together. And that was really when it seemed to be getting a little bit tricky when we tried to spend every night together like we were, you know, living together, because it just didn't make sense, and it was just a lot of schlepping. And, you know, and then you get there and it's like, okay, we're watching CNN.
So how often do you see him? How often are you together?
Well, sometimes we're together for like 10 days in a row or 2 weeks, and then, you know, we just spent the weekend together. We went to a wedding, and then before that we didn't see each other for 4 days. So we, you know, probably end up seeing each other, I'd say average 3 or 4 nights a week. 3 or 4, yeah, that's probably right.
And does he get along with your dogs?
He loves the dogs.
That's important.
And which is really remarkable because they are standard poodles. These are not the kind of dogs that, you know, men are like, oh, I love your dog. No. They're like, and he has a good friend whose wife has standard poodles. And this friend was like, oh, watch out for these poodle women.
Okay, so in the 90s, you were interviewed by Charlie Rose.
Yes.
And you said that writing was more important to you than a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So did that change, or is that still true?
No, it's probably, you know, I mean, I hate to say it, but yes, it's probably true. But that's just me. And, you know, I want to make it, I know that's not a popular opinion, that we're always supposed to say a relationship is the most important thing. And it is, but for me, it's just the way I've been ever since I was a kid. You know, I've always felt this big drive to be a writer. I mean, like a really big passion for it. And if I didn't feel that way, I definitely have a different kind of life. But because I felt that way ever since I was a kid, I feel like that's what I've had to do.
So no regrets.
No, I don't. I know. Well, what's interesting is I said something about
That's
looking back, but looking back, how you see when you're. I mean, because one of the things that I really noticed about this time was I had a lot of female friends who were like, "Oh, I'm alone. And I was like, no, you're not alone, because somewhere out there you've got like 2 or 3 kids, okay? Even if they're not calling you, and you're not calling them, and you're not with them, you still have kids, whereas if you don't have kids, you really are alone. And also, then if your parents die, then you're in a situation of, you know, you don't have parents and you don't have kids, which is an interesting place to be, and I'm in that place. And I know everyone's like, don't let this happen to you. But you know, it's a reality. You know, it's the reality of my life. For me, it's good. I mean, I actually feel like, in a weird way, I feel like for the first time in my life, with both my parents gone, I can really be me a little bit more, because I was super, super close to my father, but he was very judgmental, you know? And my parents were always like, keep it down, don't go out there, don't do this, don't do that. So I felt like I squashed a lot of things that I wanted to do and things that I felt that I could do. I mean, really, it's somewhere in the back of my head because of parental disapproval. And now it's gone, and there is something freeing about it.
So too bad Studio 44 isn't still.
Too bad Studio 54,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, and I also feel like, you know, there are things that I'm doing, and I feel the courage to try to go bigger. At this point in your life, go big or go home. Go big or go to the grave. That's my feeling. So it's, yeah, and you know what, I don't regret at all not having kids. In fact, I read in an interview where I was kind of engaged to this guy who was a doctor, and if we had gotten married, I would have had kids. And when I think about that, like, that would have been my life. I mean, it actually, even at this moment, makes me feel a little bit panicked, because I really would have felt that I wasn't doing the right thing for my particular path. So for me, it's good.
That's good.
Yes.
That's good. So you've been all over the media a lot this year, and the New York Times just published a nice article about what you do on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me laugh, sort of, because I think people think that you are having these crazy times.
I know.
And you're not, or at least not on Sundays.
No, I mean, I think this maybe goes back a little bit to the Charlie Rose question, you know, is a relationship or career more important than a relationship? I mean, for me, my relationship, yes, the career is really important, because relationships come and go. And that is the reality. And when they go, you still gotta have something of yourself. I mean, I'm a big believer in trying to be a whole person, and I think that's the best way to move around the world, as opposed to like, oh, I need this, or I, you know. So yes, it's, now I can't remember what I was saying, but.
Well, the Sunday.
Oh, right, the Sunday routine. So one thing that I really do, and I always have done, is I am very disciplined. And most of the time, it's like, no, I don't go out and all of that, because I'm writing like 6 hours a day, and it's not it's like playing an instrument. I can't do it for a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. I really have to do it for like 10 days in a row, and be really absorbed in it. So my actual life is super boring. Like, I get up, I do the same thing, I wear the same pants, I wash them like, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. I wear flip-flops. I go to the store, I make the same meal sometimes every night. Like, I get into this thing with the Shiseido peppers, and I make them like 6 nights a week. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, I gotta eat those peppers. And I exercise, and I have like this little floor routine, and then I try to walk or bicycle. And my day is really like get up, like work, and then I do exercise, and then I go to the store and I do food gathering. And then I cook the food, but while I'm doing it, I'm also working and thinking, and
so you're alone a lot of the time.
I'm alone a lot of the time, but the strange thing is I don't feel alone.
So do you think that you're an introvert?
No, but I think I have the kind of brain to do this kind of work. You have to have a certain kind of brain where you can, you really can concentrate, and it's like I get so into my head that, I don't see my environment. Like, I just don't, I don't see dirt. I don't see that my dog peed inside the house, oops. But I feel like it takes every second of my day to write what I write, and I don't know if it's like that much writing. I don't know, but it seems to take all my time.
So what do you think it is about how you write that has been so successful to go from book to TV?
Well, I feel like with Sex and the City, it was about something. It was about a new passage of time in women's lives. It was after college and before you found a partner and maybe had children and all of that. And this was a time period, it was like sort of a bonus time, because in the past, women pretty much, first you went from the house to the marriage home. You went from your house to the marriage home. Then you went from your house to college, because, 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, you were supposed to go to college and get married, not have a job. And so now there was this new period of time after college when women were going into the workforce and having careers, working alongside men, and making their families really with their female friends, because they weren't making that family with a partner. So it was actually about this new phase, or it was back then. And what's interesting about it to me is that the idea of Sex and the City and of there being this time period, you know, in between school and settling down, it translated to so many other countries. And, you know, I mean, really women from all over the world come up to me and say, you know, they love Sex and the City because it showed their parents that, look, I can have a life and be a person. I don't necessarily have to be defined by getting married. And there's nothing wrong with me if I'm not married by a certain time. So I feel like it was really about that. And, you know, TV is it's like a setting and character and a world. So, and that's really what they all had in common was, and also Sex and the City, it was a world. Lipstick Jungle was a world, and The Carrie Diaries was a world.
So this book also is a world.
Yes.
And it is going to be a TV show.
Yes, well, we are developing it, knock on wood, because we never know what will happen. But yes.
What kind of control or influence will you have on this compared to what you did before?
I was really very involved with Lipstick Jungle at the beginning.
I loved Lipstick Jungle.
You know what? I did too.
Big fan.
It was just, and the clothes were great.
Before its time.
It was. You can still watch it on Netflix. It's actually great. I gotta tell you, it's really, really hard to get a TV show on network television. But I did work on that, and I wrote a script with another writer, and then, you know, other people come on and write it, and I was a showrunner, and I was actually on the set. And
this is for Lipstick Jungle.
This was for Lipstick Jungle, and then somebody got fired, and then they call you at 10 o'clock at night, which is, what time is it their time? 7? They've been making a decision all day, and guess what? We're shutting down the show! Everybody gets fired. And then they actually started it up again. So we did it again, and you know, so I was along for all of that, and I gotta tell you, if you want to be sick with worry, work on a TV show. I mean, and there's everybody, tons of people weigh in. So it's actually the opposite of one person being in control. It's like a lot of people weigh in so that it's not out of control. You know what I'm saying? So that it's not controlled by one person. And so with this, I probably would write the pilot script or write it with another writer, a showrunner, and definitely would work with someone else. And we're just at the beginning stages. So I'm really excited because it's a way to continue telling, you know, more stories from Is There Still Sex in the City?
Right. Now, I know you watch some reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the most accurate dating show that's out there right now?
Okay, well, my favorite?
Because I have a favorite too.
Oh, okay, but mine is Married at First Sight.
So is mine.
Okay.
It's unbelievable, that show.
Okay, this is really my question. You know, we've really gone, you know, and I don't want to be too sexist here, but it feels like everything's designed for men to get what they want in terms of, you know, sex or whatever. And apparently, it's, you know, it's geared so that it's a hookup and then you never see them again, or you're not even supposed to make a date. I don't know. I don't really want to date that way. And, you know, I know there are women who don't want to, but the problem is that's almost like the only way to date. But then Married at First Sight shows us something so different. And number one, what's so interesting is, in a sense, how turned on and how excited people are when they are paired up and they are told that this is their person and it will last forever. I mean, bingo, the sexual attraction goes way up. And they also counsel them and tell them how to get over the rough spots. And it seems to me like, you know, it seems like what we really need is relationship training.
Right.
And, you know, it would be great if, you know, I mean, I think like there should be, go to this camp, you know, relationship training camp, honestly.
I agree. That's good. Okay. What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on the pilot for Is There Still Sex in the City? Right now I'm doing a book tour, so that really goes on until October. And then, you know, there's a couple of other things that I'm going to work on, but it's a little too soon to say.
Okay. What do you read? Do you read a lot?
I do.
You do. What,
I do.
Do you have anything to recommend?
You know, I've read so much. I really loved Jennifer Weiner's Mrs. Everything. A lot of you guys probably read that. Fleishman's in Trouble. City of Girls was really good. Sally Rooney's book was really good. You know, so and I've read a lot of other books.
Have you read Three Women yet?
Oh, I have. I read that very early on. I thought it was fascinating.
Yes. Very interesting book.
Exactly. And she did a great job. I mean, that's like a deep dive into women's lives, you know, 3 women's lives.
Right. And it's pretty interesting because the power, it's talking about the power that women have with their sexuality, but it's a fine balance because even when they have the power, they're not feeling 100% solid. It's sort of a fine line there.
Well, money's power. Sex is not really power. It's temporary.
Right.
So, should we do Q&A from the, I'm just wondering if we should probably do Q&A from the audience. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, do you mind?
No,
Do
that's
you-
good.
Okay, great. Does anybody have a question? You could ask me about Sex in the City, too. Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to know if your ex-husband was Mr. Big.
Okay. My ex-husband wasn't Mr. Big, but I had a real Mr. Big. And his name was Ron Galati, and he was the publisher of Vogue, and I called him Mr. Big because he was big man on campus. Everybody knew him. A lot of them were scared of him. I think he was rumored to have thrown a phone once. Everybody threw phones in those days. And, you know, I think that we were actually, you know, there were some really good things. But he was at a different place. He was coming up on 50. He didn't want to live in New York City anymore. And I felt like I was just getting started. And so ultimately, we were just not in the same place. And then my ex-husband was a principal dancer of New York City Ballet. So Darren Star always said that the Russian dancer was an homage. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who are some of your female role models?
Oh, goodness.
And may I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Melinda Gates has a wonderful book out right now all about female empowerment. It's called, oh gosh, I'm just blanking, The Moment of Lift. I highly recommend you listen to it or read it. I'm doing the audiobook, which she reads right now. And
Great.
it's wonderful, female empowerment throughout the world and what her and her husband's organization does for women and empowering women.
I think that sounds amazing because I mean, that really is the crux. It's
Thank you.
empowering women all over the world. So thank you for that. So we should all read that.
The rest of the thing, well, it's okay, I don't understand that. First of all, I want you to be my friend.
Thank you.
Second of all, I feel like my life is a little parallel in yours right now, so I want to know, how's the sex?
You know, the sex this is the interesting thing. I was thinking I was gonna go and get this laser treatment, which you can read about in the book. But you know, actually, once you start having sex, it's fine. No, I mean, it's really good. No, it's really good. I mean, the reality is, if you enjoyed sex when you were younger, you're probably going to enjoy it when you're older. You know, I mean, some people are just more sexual than other people. And I mean, it's probably going to be pretty much the same. You know, I mean, I think what's remarkable is how much it really doesn't change. I mean, it really can still be, really good. And a lot of older people do the tantric sex thing. A lot of older people do the tantric sex. Yeah, I guess they do. Hey, no, this is another thing that I realized. I went to an event and it was about a treatment for like a low female libido under certain specific circumstances. But I really got the feeling that if there were a pill out there and women could take it and you could be like, hey, I'm turned on, ready to go, let's do it, get it done, move on, I think everybody would sign up for it. So anyway, thank you very much.
I don't know what to say now. Thank you, Candace and Jennifer, very much for
Thank you.